In the film Parents, a woman becomes enraged when she observes individuals wearing bikinis on a beach. I am inclined to believe that I would have reacted similarly in her situation. However, I am not certain that this level of intelligence is a trait that I inherited from my ancestors. Instead, I am more likely to attribute this ability to my upbringing and experiences. I was employed as a bouncer at a small-town club. On that occasion, I made a remark that was met with a silence that was both unexpected and prolonged. It was not a simple, "oh," as one might have expected. Instead, it was a prolonged and echoing silence. This mother and the daughter and her companion were attempting to gain admittance to the club in the late evening hours. The daughter appeared to be relatively young and possessed a degree of physical attractiveness, clad in a fashionable ensemble that, at least to my untrained eye, seemed appropriate for the occasion. Her mother, however, was not obese but rather overweight, and her choice of attire was not flattering. She was wearing shorts and a tank top that would be considered unseemly for a supermodel, and her hair was poorly styled and dyed in an unnatural color. Additionally, she wore a multitude of costume jewelry. On the subject of the two individuals in question, it is evident that they were attempting to circumvent the established queue. The bouncer, a strikingly large figure of African descent with an unusually youthful countenance and the patience of job, rejected this proposition. This prompted a series of verbal exchanges between the two parties, which ultimately led to a state of heightened tension. The daughter, while throwing a few verbal jabs, appeared to be more irritated than anything else. The mother, who could be described as a sideshow hooker, lost her temper and began shouting racial slurs that would have caused a plantation owner's hair to stand on end. She also hurled a variety of other insults, including demands for the bouncer to get her the owner. The bouncer, however, did not react. The bouncer's direction was not polite, but rather heroic. After a few minutes of this vile screeching, the daughter was now visibly embarrassed and attempting to pull her mother away. People were gathering to watch, and the situation had become a spectator sport. The bouncer continued to politely instruct the woman to go to the back of the line. At this point, the woman was no longer attempting to argue, instead, she was screaming insults and hurling accusations. She then stated that the bouncer was an awful employee and that he would be fired that night. She then attempted to slap the bouncer, but her hand missed its target. The bouncer then took a single step forward and fell back with a shriek, shouting, "Ma'am, at any point tonight have I ever told you how to perform fellatio on flabby, obese men in an alley for 5 pounds of alcohol?" The woman was clearly perplexed and said nothing in response. However, she sputtered. He continued, "No, ma'am. I have never said anything like that, not once. So don't tell me how to do my job." The atmosphere was palpably tense, with a collective hush that seemed to stretch for blocks. She proceeded to vocalize a few more exclamations before retreating with her daughter, who was evidently restraining her. Despite the passage of over a decade, I still find myself longing to seek out that bouncer and offer him a drink. Reading this account online, I can almost smell the smoke from that burning building. If you would be so kind as to let me know your thoughts on the matter by clicking the like button, I would be most grateful. By clicking the like button, you are informing the YouTube algorithm that this video is of interest to you, which helps me to gauge the popularity of my content. Our next contribution comes from Reluctant Babysitter. I mentioned this in passing in the comments of another post of mine, but people seem to want an explanation, so I will provide one here. I am a surf instructor at a surf school on the beach. It was the end of the day. I had just finished my first class, which consisted of 5 one-hour sessions. I was covered in water and wet sand, and I was eager to remove my wetsuit and engage in some swimming before departing the beach. I was in the surf shack, which is our base of operations, with 3 colleagues. The individuals in question are referred to as Sam, Joe, and Mick, although in practice, Sam is gender neutral. I sent a text message to my boyfriend, informing him that he was only 5 minutes away. I had already completed my portion of the closing process, so while Sam affixed the closed sign to the door and secured the filing cabinet, Joe and Mick sorted through the wetsuits and returned them to their designated storage locations. I allowed the boys to conclude their tasks and proceeded to the changing area, removing my wet attire. I was attired in a tankini when I heard a loud, nasal, American accented voice exclaiming, "Excuse me, hello service, and, please." I observed that the boys were otherwise engaged, so I pulled on my skirt and proceeded to the door. The woman did not appear to conform to the stereotypical image of a Karen. She had long hair, a tan, and was wearing a bikini with a large, floppy beach hat and a sarong around her waist. Her daughter was with her and appeared to be between the ages of 10 and 12. She resembled her mother's mini-me. I am unsure as to whether she is entitled or not, as she did not utter a single word during this encounter. "May I assist you? Perhaps you could begin by putting some clothes on. My tankini is covering approximately the same amount of skin as a one-piece swimsuit would, aside from a narrow strip of exposed skin by my waist. I must admit that the neckline is somewhat." The woman, who was behaving in an entitled manner, was attired in a bikini that displayed a greater amount of exposed skin than I was. I activated my customer service mode. "I apologize, Miss Sam. Could you kindly retrieve my shirt for me?" He threw my tank top at me, and I pulled it on. "It would be preferable if you did not do that. Is there anyone else you can assist?" "I apologize, but my colleagues are currently occupied. At this moment, we are concluding the process of closing up. I would like to register my daughter for classes tomorrow." I begin to explain the availability slots, as well as the prices and requirements for enrollment. While I am doing this, I gesture with my hands and point out items on the sign-up sheet. The entitled mother, the customer, then interrupts me. "I apologize, but do you not have a sweatshirt or something? It is currently the middle of summer, and it is extremely hot." I am still technically on the clock, so I try to maintain a customer service smile. "I apologize, but I do not have a sweatshirt. Would you like me to continue assisting you? Is there no one else I could speak to? Your daughter is becoming self-conscious. My conscious mind is giving up on maintaining my polite demeanor. Your actions are making me feel self-conscious. It is the summer season, and we are on a beach in a heat wave. I do not have another gentleman to speak with. Everything that needs to be covered is covered. With all due respect, you are wearing less than I am." Sam is wearing a t-shirt. The subject is attired in a shirt and denim shorts. He recognizes the tone of voice as I am about to snap my fingers. He looks at me and I nod. He then speaks. I tell him my name is Sam Opie. He asks me why I am not wearing a skirt. I tell him my name is Sam. I explain that I am a man. I am sorry to disappoint her. She says to me, "Do you think it's appropriate to wander around like that when there's a young man nearby?" She then turns to Sam and says, "You. It would be advisable to report her to the Human Resources Department. It is a beach, and people walk around in swimwear unless it is deemed inappropriate." The individual in question is wearing a bikini, and the other is not working. It is important to note that this is a surf school, and the noise level is not excessive. The mother has not raised her voice or yelled, but the tone of the conversation is such that it could be perceived as aggressive. Mick and Joe are both wearing board shorts and flip-flops. I was wearing flip-flops and no shirt. A male companion approached me from behind. Was there a problem? The other two boys and their father, Mick, said they were there to help. The mother's eyes widened. She looked between me and the three boys, her eyes wide with shock and horror. I was simply stating that she had told me to put some clothes on. This is a beach. If anything, she was overdressed. The mother realized that she was not going to persuade me to suddenly produce more clothes to wear. She could see that the boys would not agree with her. Then she seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. "Just what were you four doing back there, closing up?" "I'm not stupid." I beg to differ. "You're telling me she answered the door practically naked, and you are all wearing barely anything. Nothing is going on here." Mick says jokingly, "Opie, we've told you not to answer the door naked." The response was one of laughter, though it was not clear whether this was in agreement or disagreement. It was evident that there was a lack of understanding of the situation. Sam, who is gay, was not in a state of undress, nor was he doubled over in laughter. His mother, who was visibly embarrassed, had her face in her hands. Sam himself appeared to be red in the face. In lieu of a more serious response, the group instead opted for further mirth. Joe, in particular, was overcome with laughter to the point of falling to the floor. Given the circumstances, it would be prudent to either join in or depart. However, at this moment, my boyfriend arrived on the scene. My boyfriend observed me, Joe, Sam, and Mick in a state of uncontrollable laughter. The daughter, meanwhile, was visibly distressed, her face buried in her hands. My boyfriend approached and embraced me. In a moment of inspiration, I decided to pull him in full view of the entitled mother. The kiss is consummated. The entitled mother emits a sound that only dogs can hear, which is perceived as a demonic noise, and departs with her daughter in tow. This is the last occasion on which the entitled mother is heard from. Hello, is this the police? I would like to report people wearing bikinis at the beach. The next Reddit post is from Shy Dry Bones. I need to write this to take the weight off me. The incident in question occurred when I was between 7 and 9 years old. This is the story of an entitled parent. My mother was a horrible parent, and as a result, I have been since the age of 8, I have undergone therapy. All of my mother's former partners were affluent individuals. Consequently, it is reasonable to conclude that she is motivated by financial gain. My mother's affection for me was contingent upon my father's provision of child support. Following the dissolution of my parents' marriage, my mother expressed discontent with the €1,500 my father was paying her each month. Additionally, she began to mistreat me. One day, while I was waiting to see my father in the living room, I heard the sound of my father's vehicle. I immediately left the sofa and, as I was about to exit the house, my mother attempts to prevent me from leaving the house, stating that I should stay here. However, I am motivated to see my father. I attempt to leave the house, but she physically restrains me and forces me back into my room. She then verbally abuses me, calling me a pig and ordering me to stay here. Despite my lack of direct involvement in the situation, I recall a portion of the conversation in which she demands to know my father's whereabouts. She then proceeds to berate me for not knowing the answer. I want to see you. Why don't you pay her enough so that she's always wearing dirty clothes? Since we can't afford them, it's your fault. I'll tell her we'll go shopping today. No, that's not enough. You'll need to pay more child support. Let me see my daughter. My dad tries to go inside, but my mom stops him. She doesn't want my dad. Furthermore, I observed my mother's lavish spending habits, which involved purchasing expensive clothing for herself while I was left with only donated garments. Additionally, I noted the deterioration in my physical and mental state since my last encounter with my father. I was subjected to sexual violence at the hands of an unidentified perpetrator, which prompted me to call the police. However, before they arrived, the perpetrator fled the scene. At this point, members of the public began to venture outside to ascertain the situation. My father was compelled to relocate. He increased his financial contributions, yet my circumstances remained unchanged. He financed my enrollment in an elite educational institution, provided private healthcare coverage, and enabled me to engage in numerous extracurricular activities. Additionally, he allocated a modest sum for acquiring fashionable attire. It is worth noting that I had never possessed such items. I attended a substandard public school, where I was subjected to bullying, had access to public healthcare, did not engage in extracurricular activities after school, and often appeared to be living in poverty. My mother, on the other hand, was content, but she consistently sought more. Despite my father's increased financial contributions, my circumstances did not improve. Frequently, my mother would neglect to take me home from school until a teacher contacted her at 7 or 8 p.m. My class concluded at 1600 hours. My mother consistently subjected me to public humiliation, exploiting me to obtain free items. I was frequently isolated due to her incessant partying, alcohol consumption, and involvement in altercations. The quality of my life was profoundly adverse. At the age of 9, I was compelled to seek admission to a mental hospital due to suicidal ideation. I distinctly recall my mother's frequent admonishment to go on, suggesting that I was a coward. I resented her assertion that I craved attention and that I was unimportant. Following my mother's near success in imprisoning my father and removing me from his care, I was left to navigate a profoundly challenging environment. As a result of her actions, she lost custody of me, which caused her distress. I subsequently began residing with my father, and she was required to allow me to see her on a monthly basis. This period spanned from the ages of 9 to 14. She attempted to sue my father for failing to provide her with child support. However, she was unsuccessful in this endeavor. Consequently, she initiated legal proceedings against him, claiming that he had traumatized her. This was on the grounds that he had been unfaithful to her with a black woman and had fathered a black child. These allegations were entirely without merit. She is also a racist, which further explains her motivation. After she was unsuccessful in this claim, she sued my father for abusing her. She then proceeded to sue him for 2 additional reasons. I do not recall the exact date on which she lost all of the cases. She terminated her legal counsel and effectively ended his career. As a result, he is no longer able to practice law and has shifted his focus to me. She employed a multitude of tactics in an attempt to gain my affection and induce me to return to her. These included purchasing inconsequential items for me that I did not desire and sending images of me in her company, accompanied by messages indicating how much her dog misses me. I am unable to take my dog with me because she altered the microchip, rendering it no longer mine. The new owner of the microchip is her current romantic partner, who has a history of violence against me. This pattern persisted until I finally asserted, "If you truly want me." In order to maintain a relationship with me, she would have to be the one to provide financial support, not her father. She did not respond and subsequently lost all interest in me. It has been 3 years since she has been in my life, and I have found these years to be the most fulfilling of my life. I recognize that this may sound overly optimistic, but I encourage you to explore the concept of raised by narcissists. This phenomenon can be described as a combination of our entitled pairings and our narcissistic pairings. I believe that many individuals who have experienced similar situations to ours can be found within this community. If you found this video informative, I request that you consider subscribing to our channel, as we release new videos daily.